Hi guys, welcome to a brand new year of Canvas videos. This one is the start of our new unit, which is all about cells. In our theme picture here, you can see a neuron, that's the green cell, which are the cells that connect your whole body to your brain. One of the most important things to get out of this unit is that there are many different types of cells, and that all of these cells are super different from each other, and they have different jobs for either the organism or for the structure that it's a part of. Take a second and try to guess which types of cells these are. Alright, so this first one is an amoeba. It's a protist, it's unicellular, which means that the one cell is also an organism all by itself. Cell number 2 is a neuron, just a different picture. It's glowing because it's sending chemical signals. They actually are small electrical impulses that communicate with different parts of the body. These cells are part of a cotton plant. You can see that they have a wall around them. They're round, but they look like they have a thicker wall. We're going to talk more about that in a few minutes. This is a T cell, which is one of your immune system cells that helps to fight off infections. These are red blood cells, the little ones, and these two with the larger purple shapes inside of them are white blood cells, WBCs for short. And then these little cells, they look big, but they're actually very, very small, are bacteria, which are the smallest cells, which we'll talk more about later on. One last cell that I want to look at is this one. You can see that this cell looks a little bit different than how most of the other cells we just looked at looked. And that's because this is a breast cancer cell. Some of you may know people who have suffered from breast cancer, terrible disease. We're going to talk more about different types of cancer later on in this unit and how it works inside your body. Alright, before we start talking about the parts of cells, it's important to know about cell theory. Remember that in science, a theory is something that is supported by many facts. So it's basically considered in science to be true. Also remember on Canvas videos, the vocab words are highlighted in yellow. So cell theory has 3 parts. The first part is that all living organisms are composed of at least one cell. An organism is any living thing. Part 2 is that the cell is the basic unit of structure, function, and organization of all organisms. So just like in chemistry, the atom is the basic unit, the cell is the basic unit in living things in biology. And then all cells come from pre-existing living cells. So the question is, where did the first cell come from? And that is, of course, an answer or a question that no one quite knows the answer to. But we do know that if we put a bunch of parts together, a bunch of molecules and atoms, a cell will just not spontaneously generate. Okay, now let's talk about organelles. Organelles are the body parts of cells. Easy to remember because organs are the body parts of you. So little organs are organelles. Here's a funny little cartoon about the different parts of the cells. We're about to learn about them in more detail. Just be aware that not every cell has all of these parts, and that's something we're going to talk about more in the coming weeks. But these are the main parts that many cells have, but not all of them have. Organelle number 1 is the cell or plasma membrane. Every single cell will have a cell or a plasma membrane. You can call it either one. It's the outer covering of the cell. It is not a wall. It's flexible. It can move. It's not a wall. It's made out of these things called phospholipids, which are these purple dots with tails. What they are is just a phosphate group, which is an element on the periodic table, that's the circle, and then 2 lipids, which are fats. So some fats are actually necessary for your cells to continue to be alive. So they're not all terrible. Organelle number 2 is the cytoplasm. Every cell also will have a cytoplasm. Cyto means cell, So that's important to know. Anytime you see cyto in any word, it means cell. It's a root. The cytoplasm is just the jelly that fills the cell. Anything inside of the plasma membrane is included in the cytoplasm. Next is the mitochondria. The mitochondria is a really important organelle. It is the powerhouse of the cell. It's also the place where cellular respiration happens. So every single cell in your body is creating energy using this process called cell respiration. And what it's doing is it's actually taking the oxygen that you breathed and the sugar that you ate, and it's turning that into energy, which is a molecule called ATP, water, and carbon dioxide, which you breathe out. So you can actually say that your energy comes directly from your food and that you actually are breathing out some of what you ate. Next is a super important organelle called the nucleus. The nucleus is the control center of the cell. You can think of it kind of like the cell's brain. It contains the DNA, which we're going to talk about in detail later on, but that's the genetic material of the cell. It is the code that makes you who you are. Super important, and it's contained inside the nucleus. Now, not every cell has a nucleus, and we're going to talk about that later on, but every cell does have DNA. In this picture right here, it says this word chromatin. Chromatin is a word for DNA that has coiled up into a smaller shape. The next organelle is this really long word, endoplasmic reticulum. You can just call it ER. There are two types of endoplasmic reticulum, and they are surrounding the nucleus. Closest to the nucleus is going to be the rough ER right here. It's called rough because it has ribosomes on top of it, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And then the smooth ER is further out. It does not have ribosomes attached to it. The job of the ER is to transport proteins. Proteins are super important to everything that you do, and it's the ER's job to move them away from the nucleus. Like I just said, attached to the rough ER are ribosomes. There are also free-floating ribosomes. They are the site of protein synthesis, which means that their job is to make proteins. You might not know that your body is able to make proteins as well as consume them. A lot of the proteins that are really important to making your body work, like hemoglobin and enzymes, are actually created by your body and not eaten. It is important to eat them because those proteins get broken down into smaller parts that will be used to rebuild your own proteins, but your body does make them on their own. The next organelle is called a vacuole. Vacuoles are just giant storage areas, not always giant, they can also be small, but in this picture here, it's very large. That's because this is a plant cell. It would make sense that a plant cell would need to store more water than an animal cell would need to, since animals are able to drink water and plants are not. So very important to know that vacuoles are larger in plant cells. They can also store things that are not water, like food or waste. There are many different types, but often they do store water. The last two organelles we're going to talk about are only found in plant cells, or plant-like cells. So the first is chloroplast. Be careful because this sounds similar to cytoplasm. It is not the same. Chloroplasts will appear green. That's because they contain the pigment chlorophyll. They're also the location where photosynthesis happens, and that's where the plants are able to make their own food using sunlight and carbon dioxide. So without chloroplasts, a plant cannot do photosynthesis. The other plant-only organelle is a cell wall. So don't get this confused with the cell membrane, which is flexible. The cell wall is not flexible. It is rigid, like a wall, exactly like you would imagine a wall to be. It will not bend. Okay, pause the video and try to label these organelles. Then start it again and see if you got the answers right. Okay, here are your answers. You should have gotten that A was the mitochondria, B was the vacuole, C was the ribosome, D was the cell membrane. If you said cell wall because that looked really thick to you, that's acceptable. This is the nucleus, cytoplasm, the filling, ER, technically smooth because there's no ribosomes. However, I'm not super worried about you knowing the difference. All right, that's it for this week. Make sure to do your Canvas post, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.